Hey guys, welcome to my Flash demonstration here. I'm going to take you through the basics of animation in Flash using a combination of traditional theories, things like overlapping action at a very basic form, and also a combination of Flash cheats, things like motion tweening. So you'll notice this character I've built here is built pretty much for Flash. Very easy to animate. He's divided into extremely simple shapes. I mean, he's got his main body here, patch on the stomach. His arms are a symbol. We've got his hands, his legs, and his feet, and his head comp here. So that's about all there is to him. The reason I like to create characters this simple for Flash is because I can get away with doing things like just scaling his body without having to redraw too many elements. So I've created that compose for him, and he's basically just going to animate from this to this pose where I guess he's throwing his arms up in excitement. Probably a really good stage to start, something simple to show you. So there's a couple things I want to do here. I want to set my antic. From this pose, he's going to motion tween into an antic, overshoot on this pose, and settle back to this pose after the overshoot. So what I'm going to want to do is start out setting my antic. So I'm going to count back a couple frames, and I'm just guessing on the timing now. You can always adjust it later. But I'm going to go back maybe 4 frames, allowing for my in-between here, which is going to be a combination of motion tweening elements, like these elements here, and then I'll have to redraw some legs and hands and arms during my in-between. So this is the keyframe here, frame 17, that I'm gonna set my antic on. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do that now. I've got a bunch of parts I can manipulate at the same time. So I'm gonna grab his stomach, his body, his head comp, and his legs, and that's about it. So I'm gonna scale him down here using my transform tool, which is this one up here. I think the hotkey for it is Q. So I'm gonna just scale him down, and I want to make sure I maintain my volume. So if I scale him down, obviously he's going to shrink. So I'm going to bring him out on the sides as well, just so that he doesn't get off model there. So I have basic movement of him shrinking down, which is a good start here on into his antic. So now I want to bring his arms down. Going to move his arms down a little bit here, and the same thing with his face. If I bring his face down, it's going to give the illusion that he's looking down a little bit more, a bit of a rotation on his head. Same thing with the stomach patch there. So I'm getting something that I kind of like. Very basic start. You'll notice if you look closely, his legs are slipping off his heels there, so you might want to skew them back a little bit just to have them connect right to the heel. I'm going to rotate the hands down a little bit, make him look like he's reaching down, and once again, you can get really into this and redraw new hands for this pose, but I'm not gonna get concerned with it at this point. So you'll see if I rotate the hand, it's sort of snapping and moving ahead. To get rid of that snap, I can just turn my magnet off here and then rotate it again, and that'll prevent the snap from happening. Alright, so I'm just zooming back up here. I mean, this is pretty basic antic. It's working for me. Might want to move his hands down a little bit more. His hands and his arms. I always want to make sure that my lines are connecting here to the body, so they're not going off or doing something like that. Alright, so I've got my antics set. Next thing I want to do is set my overshoot here. So you'll see this is the pose that he's going to overshoot and then settle. So I may give him maybe 8 frames to settle on. Once again, you can always adjust those later. If it seems like too much, you can drag your keyframes back and change that to 6 frames or 4 frames or whatever you feel is necessary. So I'm going to count ahead here, and I'm just using my arrow key to the right of my M N key, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for now on frame 29, and drag down and hit F6 to make a new set of keyframes. So you'll notice here I'm on frame 21 and on here 29. I want to keep it odd numbers so that when I go and I break it back onto twos, put my animation on twos later on, I'm not concerned with even and odd numbers. It's always going to be in multiples of 2. Alright, so I've set my end pose, and I'm going to end on this pose on frame 29. So if I go back to frame 21, I'm going to set my overshoot here, and I'm just going to grab the elements that I can reuse. I think I'll do something like this. Grab all of these elements, hit Q again for transform, and just tweak them up a little bit using the transform tool, just to scale them over. And this is kind of like flipping drawings traditionally. I can just scale through and see if I have something that I'm liking. I mean, that's working pretty good. I don't want to overshoot them too far, just because it's a simple move. So I'm going to take the arms now and just move them up a little bit. And just kind of see how that's working. I mean, it's got my overshoot and settle, and the same thing I did when I rotated him down. I moved his face and his stump patch down, so here I can move up a couple frames there. Alright, so I don't mind what I have so far. I'm gonna just zoom in here and grab the arms and maybe skew them up a little bit just to exaggerate the action of the arms going up. Okay, so I've got a start to the action here. So what I want to do now is I want to animate into my antics. So I'm going to count back. Maybe I'll try a 6-frame antic. So I'm going to count back 6 frames from frame 17 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to make a new set of keys on frame 11. And this is where I'm going to create my motion tween. So to create a motion tween, I'm just going to select all of the dead area in between my 2 keyframes here. And I can either go up to properties or right click here and go up to create motion tween. So now you'll see I have an animated move going into my antic. It's very robotic. I haven't set any sort of timing to it yet. So to set the timing, I'm going to highlight all of those keyframes there. And up in properties drop down menu, you will notice an edit right here. I think in CS4 there's a pencil that you have to click on. So click on the edit and it'll bring up this graph, and for those of you familiar with CG, it's a lot of the same principles apply here. So I'm going to click on this first square in the corner and it'll bring up this circle, and I'm going to drop that down. And what this is here, it's basically telling me the percentage of the tween, and then down here I'm tweening between frame 11 and 17 over here. So I'm just going to drag this over a little bit, and this means that it's easing out of the first keyframe, and then it's picking up speed in the middle, and then I'm going to go up to the end and I'm going to set a cushion out, fairly extreme one here, going into my pose. So I can play around with that and see how that's working for me. I don't mind that so much, but I can still readjust it later. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on my overshoot and settle. I'm going to select all the dead area in between. This time I'll go up here and just set my tween to motion. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'll give it an S curve. So I've got a basic antic and overshoot and settle happening here. I mean, at this point I can look at it and adjust it even further and say, okay, maybe I want a bit more of an overshoot. So I'll just grab those elements again and skew them back up. Oops, forgot to grab the legs here. And maybe bring the arms up a little bit more. Okay, so I really don't mind what's going on here. If anything, I might want couple less frames. Like if I want to adjust my timing, I can just highlight this first row of keyframes, or any row of keyframes for that matter, and just move them around. So that's what I'm